Deportation flights of illegal immigrants from the US are starting. See Colombia recently. But why the strong-arm tariff tactics from the US on its Central and Southern American neighbours? And what's the point of carrying a big stick or tariff if you can't use it? Join me, Jan Darasz, for How We Got Here.
Full reverse. For decades, people from across the globe have been migrating to the US via Latin and South America. But with Donald Trump back in the White House, Washington is changing course on its policy toward deportations. On Wednesday, the first flight carrying deported Asian migrants arrived in Panama.
There aren't many. On the first flight, 119. I know they're expected to complete the other two flights, so we'll get maybe 360 people.
Historically, immigration policies such as the Chinese Exclusion Act signed in May 1882, prohibiting all immigration of Chinese laborers for 10 years, or the Immigration Act of 1924 introducing restrictive European quotas, led US industries to rely more on Mexican and Latin American laborers. World War II saw millions of Mexican workers fill labor shortages in the US. Economic shifts pushed tens of thousands of Puerto Ricans to migrate to New York City between the 1940s and 1960s, while the Cuban Revolution forced professionals and business elites to resettle in Miami. A US-backed coup in 1954 brought political instability to Guatemala, triggering US-bound migration. Dictatorship in the Dominican Republic drew many nationals to seek a better life in the US. Civil wars in El Salvador, Guatemala, and Nicaragua led to mass displacement. Many nationals took refuge in the US, but policies like the Reagan administration's restrictions made resettling an iffy enterprise. In 1986, the Immigration Reform and Control Act granted amnesty to about 3 million undocumented migrants, mostly Mexicans, but also increased border enforcement. In the 21st century, US-bound migrants from the US have encountered mounting difficulties. Policies like Operation Gatekeeper and post-9/11 security measures pushed migrants to more dangerous routes. Perhaps the most dangerous has been the Darien Gap, located in the dense, lawless jungle between Colombia and Panama. Trump's first term saw an over 450-mile-long wall built along the border with Mexico. His policies include the Remain in Mexico policy, which forced asylum seekers to wait in Mexico rather than enter the US, as well as the family separation policy, under which thousands of migrant children were separated from their parents at the border. Trump's administration also rode on the back of the COVID-19 pandemic, using it as a pretext to expel migrants without asylum hearings. Trump's current crackdowns on migration are an extension of his America First idea and an alleged drive to clamp down on drug trafficking. According to 2022 data from the US Census Bureau, there were 20.4 million Hispanic first-generation immigrants in the US.
I'm delighted to be joined today by Dr. Joanna Gotłowska-Bolek, a Latin Affairs expert at the University of Warsaw. Welcome to the programme once more.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Great to have you. President Trump has almost made an immediate focus on several key areas, one of which is Central America. There's a recent spat between the United States and Colombia over the deportation flights of illegal immigrants. Can you just explain to us, is this a recent phenomenon, or have these deportations, the flights of illegal immigrants, been a consistent policy, not just with the Biden administration, but the previous Trump administration, the last 10 years or so?
So this is one of the elements of the US policy towards Latin America, and we've been observing this kind of flights for many years. During Barack Obama's first term, there were almost 3 million people deported from the US towards Latin America, so it's a great number. During the first Donald Trump's term, it was about 1 million, so it's not consistent with his narrative that he's going to deport a lot of people. 1 million is not that much, especially when you compare this number with 11 million of undocumented migrants that live in the United States.
Why was the President Trump's first policy, or the first term, lacking in success as compared to President Obama's? What did President Barack Obama actually do correctly to facilitate, if that's the word to use, the return
maybe
of
he
these
was
immigrants?
more successful because he took steps more consciously, and in Donald Trump's era it was a more chaotic way of acting. So he prepared his legal steps with no consideration, and then there were problems with this legacy. So maybe this is the answer. Still, now he's well prepared, better prepared, because he has this record of all the problems, and he really focused on migration. So during his campaign, we could see that the two first points of his declaration, 2 out of 20 are focused on migration. And when you look at these 11 million undocumented people living in the United States, 75% of them come from Latin America, and almost half of them come from Mexico. So this is focused as well on Latin America, and these deportee flights will continue probably.
The instrument that President Trump is using at the moment is kind of bullying neighbours and threatening them with tariffs, and then withdrawing the tariffs, getting concessions in a very strong-arm kind of way. They seem to be working with countries like Colombia, Mexico, Canada.
We could see the accident that drew our attention in the case of Colombia, because Donald Trump tried to send 2 flights with Colombian migrants to this country, and the Colombian President Gustavo Petro just opposed and said he is not accepting this. After hours, yes, he accepted because of the threats of rising tariffs, and the US is main trade partner of Colombia. But what was behind this, we couldn't see, but in fact, it was the first case in many years when Donald Trump used a military aircraft to send these Colombian people, and they just said, and Gustavo Petro said that they were treated really without any dignity, handcuffed, and without any access to the toilet, and so on. So he was against this kind of treatment, because Colombia has accepted this kind of flights for many years.
Yes. What has been the effect on countries like Colombia? You say 10 to 11 million people are living undocumented lives in the United States. They may be sending millions of dollars in remittances over to their families. It must be a net drain on talent and entrepreneurial human resources that 10 million people have been exported or have gone away from Central America? What has been the effect on these countries?
So the vast majority of these people work. They pay taxes, they just have families, they also create the American society. So if we take them out of their places, that there will be lack of something, lack of people to work, and also talented people, also people who have some special abilities, and all this, of course, is some kind of danger for American economy, of course, and the danger for Latin American economies is also obvious, because they would have to accept people for whom there is no job. No place to live. Yes. Maybe they will not pay remittances any longer. And in countries like Salvador, like Honduras or Guatemala, these remittances form like 25% of GDP. So it's a big save.
Huge proportion. Moving into the historical dimension, you mentioned a very. We talked before we came on air, about the lack of consistent policy, U.S. policy with regard to the region, the Central American region. Could you just outline to us? You mentioned that this wasn't formulated. It hasn't been formulated even since the Carter regime and the Carter administration in the 1970s. Why was this? Why did the United States not focus on this region, except just to intervene?
So maybe this is because the United States used to treat Latin America as their backyard, and all Latin American countries except Cuba just voted in international fora as the United States wanted them to vote. So there was no problem with them. So the presidents of the United States just focused on other regions, countries that created more chaos or more challenges. So they forgot a bit Latin America. So Latin America just says about lack of attention and lack of investments, lack of financial aid and things like this. So in the beginning of this century, China came. China appeared in this region. So we have noticed a growing investment, growing trade with China. So Donald Trump now is angry with China and with these close relations. Maybe he will be the first president in many years to focus on Latin America, because he just treats this region as a source of problems. Maybe these are not problems, but challenges, and he should seek also the solutions in Mexico or Panama or Colombia.
The countries of the region have a choice then, haven't they? China or the United States. China's not going to go. It seems to be a cauldron that is slowly heating up.
In the moment, yes, we can see this in Peru, which is the closest trade partner of China now. They have just opened a mega port of Chancay close to Lima, which is going to be used as the mega port for South America, at least. So the United States are a bit angry with these steps and China going really very deeply inside South America. So I believe that with this kind of policy that Donald Trump is creating, this kind of chaos and threats and lack of aid that he just said that he's not going to pay all these non-governmental organizations to help these root causes of root problems in Latin America. So all these elements can put many Latin American countries closer to China instead.
So the you said about the Carter doctrine, and then the Monroe Doctrine. You mentioned the Monroe Doctrine. Is this one of the fundamental problems of the American strategic thinking? Is that it regards its own hemisphere as its own? China has come in, and the United States has been asleep, as it were, strategically thinking.
So. Many presidents, U.S. presidents, just talk that the Monroe Doctrine is dead. That's not longer alive. They don't need this any longer. So Latin America was put aside, but in other words, they could do what they treated as more attractive for them. For instance, build their connections with China or the European Union, in the case of Mercosur countries. Now Donald Trump, in his first term, he just started to resurrect Monroe Doctrines, and he said, yes, Latin America is our backyard again, and maybe in the second term we will see even more Donald Trump in Latin America, and his focus on countries like Panama, like Mexico for sure, and other countries. Let's think about Brazil or Colombia, the big economies, and we don't see any real interest of the United States in Brazil, for instance. So what's going to happen in Brazil? Will they be closer to China in this time, or maybe this is a place for the European Union to act with this Mercosur agreement again?
Yes. A multipolar world, I suppose. Dr. Gotłowska-Bolek, thank you very much for coming along to the programme.
Thank you for having me.
That's all we have time for. Do join us next time. You know when we are here, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 2:15 p.m. CET. See you then.